He had power, wealth, and a plan. The billionaire didn't need love. He needed an heir. So he hired a surrogate, a quiet, reserved young woman who never asked for more than what was agreed. But during a routine medical check, the doctor paused, then looked him in the eye. She's a virgin. The billionaire, known for making billion-dollar decisions, in seconds froze. What he did next stunned his lawyers, his staff, and even the surrogate herself. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Whether you're new here or a loyal subscriber, I truly appreciate you for being part of our growing storytelling community. If you love emotional, dramatic, and unexpected stories that stay with you long after the end, this is the place for you. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend who loves a good twist. Now, let's dive into a story that began with a contract, but ended with a decision that changed two lives forever. Huge millionaire finds surrogate is a virgin and makes a life-changing decision instantly. When billionaire Nathaniel Bruce learned his chosen surrogate had never been touched by a man, the revelation didn't just stop his heart. It changed his soul forever. What would you do if you discovered someone was willing to sacrifice their most precious gift just to survive? Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, because tomorrow I have another beautiful story to share with you, and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now, let's get into the story. The marble floors of Bruce Industries' executive building gleamed under the afternoon sun, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Every surface in the 42nd floor conference room spoke of wealth, so vast it had become sterile. Crystal water glasses that had never known a fingerprint, leather chairs worth more than most people's cars, and a view of downtown Manhattan that stretched endlessly toward the Hudson River. Nathaniel Bruce stood with his back to the room, his 6 feet 4 inches frame filling out a charcoal suit that cost more than some people made in 3 months. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his broad shoulders rigid with the weight of decision that had consumed him for the past year. At 38, he had everything money could buy, everything except the one thing his billions couldn't purchase. An heir. She should be here any moment, his mother, Victoria Bruce, said from her position at the mahogany conference table. At 72, she remained elegant in her navy Chanel suit, her silver hair styled in a classic Shannon, pearls adorning her neck-like armor against sentiment. The agency assured me she meets all our requirements. Nathaniel turned from the window, his steel-gray eyes reflecting none of the turmoil churning beneath his composed exterior. Requirements, he repeated, the word tasting bitter on his tongue, as if we're hiring for a position rather than asking someone to carry my child. That's exactly what we're doing, Victoria replied crisply, adjusting the stack of legal documents before her. This is a business arrangement, Nathaniel. Nothing more. The sooner you understand that, the better. But understanding and accepting were two different things. Nathaniel had built his empire on cold calculation, on viewing every human interaction through the lens of profit and loss. Yet something about this felt different. Perhaps it was the desperation that had driven him to this point. 3 failed marriages, each woman more interested in his bank account than building a family. Perhaps it was a ticking clock of his own mortality, the realization that for all his success, he would leave behind nothing but corporate structures and financial statements. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. The door opened, and Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. She was nothing like what he'd expected. Deborah Williams moved into the room with a grace that seemed to defy her circumstances. 24 years old, according to her file. She stood about 5 feet 6 inches, with rich brown skin that seemed to glow despite the obvious exhaustion in her dark eyes. Her long hair was braided simply down her back, and she wore a purple blazer that had clearly been borrowed or bought secondhand. The sleeves slightly too long, the fabric worn at the edges. But it was her dignity that struck him most. Despite the nervous way her fingers twisted together, despite the careful way she moved, as if afraid to disturb the expensive air around her, she held her head high. There was intelligence in her eyes, a quiet strength that no amount of desperation could fully diminish. "Miss Williams," Victoria said, rising with the practiced smile she perfected in decades of charity galas and board meetings. "Please have a seat." Deborah nodded, her voice soft but clear. "Thank you, Mrs. Bruce." She glanced at Nathaniel, and for a moment their eyes met. He saw something flicker there, not the calculating look he was used to from women, but something raw, vulnerability mixed with determination. "Mr. Bruce," she said, extending her hand. When their fingers touched, Nathaniel felt an unexpected jolt. Her hand was soft but calloused. The hands of someone who worked, who struggled, who knew the value of every dollar she'd never had. "Ms. Williams, please sit." She took the chair across from them, her posture straight, despite the way her hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. Nathaniel found himself studying her face, searching for signs of the artifice he'd grown accustomed to. Instead, he saw only honesty and a bone-deep weariness that spoke of battles fought long before she'd entered this room. "I trust the agency explained the arrangement," Victoria began, her tone businesslike. "Mr. Bruce requires a gestational surrogate. The compensation is substantial, $500,000 plus all medical expenses and living allowances during the pregnancy." Deborah's eyes widened slightly at the figure, and Nathaniel saw her swallow hard. "Yes, ma'am. They explained everything." "Good. Now, we do have some additional questions beyond what the agency covered." Victoria consulted her notes. "Your medical history shows you're in excellent health. No history of substance abuse, no genetic markers for hereditary diseases. Your psychological evaluation came back favorable." The agency was very thorough, Deborah said quietly. Nathaniel found himself leaning forward. "Ms. Williams, may I ask what brings you to this decision?" "Surrogacy is. It's not something most young women consider lightly." For the first time, her composure cracked slightly. He saw her jaw tighten, saw the way her fingers pressed together until her knuckles palled. "My mother," she said finally, "he has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The treatments, insurance doesn't cover everything. The experimental therapy that might give her a chance costs more than I could make in 10 years. The honesty of her answer hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. No mention of wanting money for luxuries. No grand plans for the compensation. Just a daughter trying to save her mother's life. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "That must be incredibly difficult." Deborah looked up at him, and he saw surprise in her eyes, as if kindness from a billionaire was unexpected. "She's all I have," she said simply. "I'll do whatever it takes." Victoria cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional turn. "Yes, well, we're sorry for your circumstances. Now, regarding the legal aspects." "Wait," Nathaniel said, holding up a hand. Something was nagging at him, a detail from her file that hadn't quite made sense. "Ms. Williams, your medical records show you've never been pregnant before." "That's correct." But he hesitated, unsure why this felt important. "Have you ever, forgive me if this is too personal, but have you consulted with a doctor about your ability to conceive?" A flush crept up Deborah's neck. The agency required a complete fertility workup. Everything came back normal. Victoria was shuffling through the medical reports. "Yes, here it is. Excellent reproductive health. No complications expected." She paused, reading more carefully. Although what?" Nathaniel asked. His mother's eyebrows rose. "Well, this is unusual. According to the examining physician's notes, Miss Williams has never been sexually active." The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't yet exploded. Deborah's face flushed deeper, but she lifted her chin. "Is that a problem?" Nathaniel felt the world tilt around him. Never been sexually active. 24 years old, and she was... "You're a virgin," he said quietly. It wasn't a question, and she didn't treat it like one. "Yes." The single word contained no shame, no apology, just a fact stated with the same dignity she'd shown since walking into the room. Victoria was staring at the medical report as if it might change upon closer inspection. "This is highly unusual for someone her age." "I've been focused on other things," Deborah said. "School, work, taking care of my mother. She shrugged. "I never met anyone worth that gift." Gift. The word echoed in Nathaniel's mind as he stared at this young woman who was willing to give up something precious, something she protected for 24 years to save her mother's life. She wasn't just offering to carry his child. She was offering to sacrifice her innocence, her first intimate experience for money, for survival. Something cold and sick twisted in his stomach. What kind of man did that make him? What kind of monster was he to take advantage of such desperation? How would you react if you discovered someone was willing to sacrifice something so personal just to save their family? Let me know in the comments what you think Nathaniel should do. The silence that followed Deborah's confession stretched across the conference room like a chasm. Nathaniel stared at her, his mind reeling as the full weight of what she just revealed settled over him. 24 years old, a virgin willing to sacrifice something sacred to save her mother's life. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting longer shadows across the marble floor, and the golden light filtering through the windows. Deborah looked even younger than her years, vulnerable, innocent in a way that made Nathaniel's chest tighten with something he couldn't immediately name. Victoria broke the silence first, her voice carefully neutral. Well, that's unexpected, but it doesn't change the medical feasibility of the arrangement. Nathaniel watched Deborah's face as his mother spoke. He saw the way her jaw tensed, the way her hands gripped each other tighter in her lap. She was trying so hard to appear composed, professional, as if discussing the most intimate details of her life in a boardroom was perfectly normal. "No," Deborah said quietly. "It doesn't change anything. The doctor said there wouldn't be any complications with the procedure. My inexperience won't affect my ability to carry a child." The clinical way she spoke about it made Nathaniel's stomach churn. Procedure, as if what they were asking her to do was just another medical transaction. "Ms. Williams," he said slowly, his voice rougher than he intended, "do you understand what this process involves?" She looked directly at him, and he saw a flicker of something defiant in her dark eyes. "I'm not a child, Mr. Bruce. I understand perfectly. Do you?" The words came out sharper than he meant them to because gestational surrogacy requires in vitro fertilization. It requires medical procedures that are intimate, invasive. You'll be examined, monitored, treated by doctors who will know things about your body that you've never shared with anyone. A flush crept up her neck, but she didn't look away. "I'm aware of that, and you're willing to go through all that? To let strangers touch you, examine you, penetrate your body with medical instruments?" He stopped abruptly, realizing how harsh his words sounded. "Nathaniel," Victoria said sharply, "that's quite enough." But Deborah held up a hand. "No, it's all right." She looked at Nathaniel with those steady, intelligent eyes. "You want to know if I've really thought this through? If I understand why I'm giving up?" "Yes," he said simply. She was quiet for a long moment, and he could see her gathering her thoughts, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Bruce, I've worked 3 jobs since I was 16 to help support my mother and myself. I've cleaned office buildings at night, worked double shifts at a diner, where men old enough to be my grandfather thought they could put their hands on me because I needed the tips. I've had my car repossessed, my electricity shut off, and I've eaten nothing but ramen noodles for weeks at a time." Her voice remained steady, but Nathaniel could hear the steel beneath the softness. "So yes, I understand exactly what I'm giving up, and I understand exactly why I'm giving it up. My mother is dying, Mr. Bruce. Every day I wait is a day closer to losing her forever. If letting doctors examine me and going through some uncomfortable procedures means I can save her life, then that's what I'll do." The conviction in her voice hit him like a physical blow. Here was a woman who had faced hardship he could barely imagine, who had sacrificed and struggled and endured, and she was willing to sacrifice even more. The most intimate part of herself. Her first experience of physical intimacy would be clinical, cold, transactional. "But don't you want?" He started, then stopped. How could he ask her about dreams and desires when she was drowning in desperation? "Want what?" she asked. "Your first time to be special with someone you love." Something flickered across her face. Pain maybe, or longing. "Mr. Bruce, when you grow up the way I did, you learn that wanting things and getting them are 2 very different things. I wanted to go to college. I wanted my mother to stay healthy. I wanted a lot of things that life didn't give me. So you learn to want what you can actually have." The matter-of-fact way she spoke about letting go of dreams made Nathaniel's chest ache. He thought about his own life, about having everything he'd ever wanted handed to him, about never having to choose between love and survival. Victoria cleared her throat. "Well, Now that we've established that Ms. Williams understands the process, perhaps we can move forward with the legal documentation. Actually, Nathaniel said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade, I think we need to discuss the timeline. Deborah straightened. The agency said you wanted to begin the process as soon as possible. That's right. Nathaniel stood abruptly, moving to the window again. The city sprawled below him, millions of people living their lives, struggling with their own battles. How many of them had ever faced the choice Deborah was facing? How quickly do you need the money? The question was blunt, but he needed to know, needed to understand just how desperate her situation was. The treatment my mother needs. They want to start next month. I need to make the first payment within 2 weeks, or they'll give her spot to someone else. 2 weeks. Nathaniel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her timeline pressing against his conscience. 2 weeks to save her mother's life. And she was sitting in his conference room, prepared to give up something precious to make it happen. And how much do you need for the first payment? $50,000. $50,000, less than he spent on wine in a month, less than he'd paid for the watch on his wrist. For her, it was the difference between her mother living and dying. Miss Williams, he said, turning back to face her, can you excuse us for a moment? I need to speak with my mother privately. Confusion flickered across her face, but she nodded. Of course. Should I wait outside, please? Will just be a few minutes. After Deborah left, closing the door softly behind her, Victoria immediately rounded on her son. What are you doing, Nathaniel? He was pacing now, his usual composure cracking. Did you see her face, Mother? Did you hear what she said? I heard a young woman who is willing to fulfill a contract we're offering her. Frankly, I'm not sure why her personal experience matters. It matters because she's a human being, not a piece of equipment. The words exploded out of him with more force than he'd intended. She's 24 years old, and she's never been with a man because she's been too busy working herself to death to take care of her dying mother. And now she's sitting out there prepared to let doctors to undergo medical procedures that will be her first and only intimate experience. All so she can save the woman who raised her. Victoria studied her son with sharp eyes. You're getting emotional about this? Damn right, I'm getting emotional. Nathaniel slammed his hand against the window, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Do you know what kind of man it makes me if I go through with this? What kind of monster takes advantage of someone's desperation like this? You're not taking advantage of anything. You're offering her a fair contract for services rendered. Services rendered. He whirled to face her. Mother, we're talking about a woman's body, her first intimate experience, her innocence, and you want to reduce it to services rendered. Victoria's expression softened slightly. Nathaniel, I understand your concerns, but no, you don't. He was quiet now, but there was steel in his voice. You don't understand at all, because if you did, you wouldn't be sitting there talking about contracts and procedures while that woman is out there scared and desperate and willing to sacrifice everything for love. The word hung between them, love. That's what this was really about. Deborah's love for her mother. So fierce and complete that she would give up her dreams, her innocence, her future to save the woman who raised her. And what was he offering in return? Cold clinical procedures. A transaction that would reduce the most intimate moments of her life to medical necessity. What would you sacrifice for the person you love most? Let me know in the comments if you think love should have limits. Nathaniel moved to his desk, pulling out his personal checkbook. His hands were steady as he wrote, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. What are you doing? Victoria asked. Well, I should have done the moment I learned the truth about her. He tore the check free, staring at it for a moment before folding it carefully. I'm making a life-changing decision. Nathaniel, think about what you're doing. You wanted an heir for years. This is your best option. My best option. He looked at his mother with something approaching pity. Mother, my best option isn't to exploit a desperate woman's circumstances. My best option is to be the kind of man who protects people like Deborah, not the kind who uses them. He moved toward the door, then paused. Do you know what I realized while she was sitting there talking about giving up her dreams? I realized that I spent my entire life taking things from people, taking their companies, their resources, their time. I've built an empire on taking. But I've never once asked myself what I could give. You give plenty. Your charitable foundation. Writing checks isn't giving, Mother. Not really. It's just moving money around. He looked back at her. Real giving requires sacrifice. It requires putting someone else's needs before your own wants. And you think that's what this is? I think this is the first real choice I've ever made in my life. He opened the door to find Deborah sitting in the hallway, her hands folded in her lap, her posture straight despite the exhaustion he could see in the set of her shoulders. She looked up when he appeared, and he saw hope and fear wearing in her eyes. "Ms. Williams, could you come back in, please?" She followed him into the conference room, her movements careful and controlled. Victoria was still seated at the table, her expression unreadable. "Please sit," Nathaniel said. Deborah took her seat, and he could see her trying to read his face, trying to understand what had happened during their private conversation. "Miss Williams," he began, then stopped. "How did you tell someone that their willingness to sacrifice everything had fundamentally changed your understanding of yourself? Is there a problem with the arrangement?" She asked quietly. "Yes," he said simply. "There is." He saw her face go pale, saw her hands grip each other tighter. "I see. I'm sorry if I said something wrong. I know my situation is unusual, but I promise you I'm committed to fulfilling the contract. I won't back out or change my mind." The desperation in her voice was like a knife to his chest. She thought he was rejecting her, abandoning her when she needed help most. "Deborah," he said, using her first name for the first time, "you didn't say anything wrong. In fact, you said everything right. You showed me exactly what kind of person you are and exactly what kind of person I've been." Confusion flickered across her face. "I don't understand." Nathaniel pulled the folded check from his pocket, holding it carefully. "You came here today prepared to sacrifice something precious to save your mother's life. You were willing to give up your first intimate experience to undergo medical procedures that would forever change how you experience physical intimacy. All for love." "Yes," she said simply, "and I was prepared to let you do it. I was prepared to take advantage of your desperation, to use your love for your mother as leverage to get what I wanted." He shook his head. "That makes me the worst kind of man. Deborah, the kind who profits from other people's pain." "Mr. Bruce, I don't understand what you're saying." He held out the check. "I'm saying that your mother is going to get her treatment, but not because you sacrifice yourself for it. She's going to get it because sometimes when you show someone what real love looks like, it changes them." Deborah stared at the check, but didn't take it. "What is this?" "It's a check for $200,000. More than enough to cover your mother's entire treatment, not just the first payment." The color drained completely from her face. "I can't accept this. We haven't signed the contract. I haven't done anything to earn it." "You don't have to earn it, Deborah. It's not payment for services. It's not a loan. It's a gift. I don't understand." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why would you give me this?" Nathaniel knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "Because you showed me something today that I'd forgotten existed. You showed me what it looks like when someone loves so completely, so selflessly that they'll sacrifice everything for another person. And you made me realize that I've never loved anyone or anything that much in my entire life." Tears were starting to form in her eyes. "But the surrogacy, there will be no surrogacy, Deborah. At least not with you. I won't be party to exploiting your circumstances or asking you to sacrifice your innocence for money. What you have your first experience of intimacy that should be yours to give to someone you choose, someone you love when you're ready, not to a medical procedure performed for a stranger's benefit." The tears spilled over now, tracking down her cheeks. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll take the money and save your mother. Say you'll go back to school, if that's what you want. Say you'll keep your dreams instead of selling them." She looked down at the check, her hands shaking. "This is really happening. You're really giving me this? I'm really giving you this. But why? Why would you do this for a stranger?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, searching for the right words. "Because meeting you made me realize that I've spent my whole life accumulating wealth and power, but I've never once used either to protect someone who needed protecting. I've never put someone else's needs before my own wants." And because he paused, surprised by the emotion in his own voice. Because someone who loves the way you love deserves to be protected, not exploited. Deborah reached for the check with trembling fingers. When she spoke, her voice was thick with tears. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you enough. You don't need to thank me, Deborah. You need to go save your mother. Behind them, Victoria had remained silent throughout the exchange. When Nathaniel finally stood and turned to face her, he saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen in years. Pride, maybe, or recognition. Well, she said quietly, I suppose this means we'll need to find another way for you to have an heir. Nathaniel looked back at Deborah, who was still staring at the check as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. Maybe, he said, but maybe I needed to learn how to protect and love before I was ready to be a father. Anyway, for the first time in years, Victoria smiled at her son with genuine warmth. Maybe you did. Have you ever had a moment that completely changed your perspective on what really matters? Share your thoughts on what you think about Nathaniel's transformation in the comments below. The restaurant Nathaniel chose was elegant but understated. White tablecloths and soft lighting. The kind of place where important conversations happened over carefully prepared meals. Deborah sat across from him in Victoria, still seeming slightly overwhelmed by the turn her day had taken. She'd insisted on going home to change first, returning in a simple black dress that somehow made her look both professional and stunning. So tell me about yourself, Deborah, Victoria said, cutting into her salmon with practiced precision. Beyond the circumstances that brought you to us today, Deborah sat down her fork, her posture straightening slightly. Even in this relaxed setting, Nathaniel could see her natural dignity reasserting itself. There's not much to tell, really. I grew up in Brooklyn with my mother. She worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat after my father left when I was 8. That must have been difficult, Victoria said, her tone gentler than usual. It was. But my mother, she's incredible. She never once made me feel like his leaving was anything but his loss. She taught me that your circumstances don't define you. Your choices do. Deborah glanced at Nathaniel. She always said that when you have the power to change someone's life for the better, you have a responsibility to do it. The words hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. How many times in his life had he had that power and chosen not to use it? How many times had he walked past someone like Deborah and never even seen them? She sounds like a remarkable woman, he said quietly. She is. She worked as a nurse's aide at a free clinic in our neighborhood for 15 years. Even when she got sick, she kept going in on her good days, saying the people there needed her. Deborah's voice caught slightly. She's the one who taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day to put someone else's needs before your own. Victoria set down her wine glass, studying Deborah with new interest. And what about you? What did you want to be when you were growing up? A teacher originally. I wanted to work with kids who came from situations like mine. But then my mother got sick and college became impractical. She shrugged. But Nathaniel could see the pain behind her casual tone. Life has a way of changing your plans. But you still want to start that foundation. Nathaniel said, more than ever, being in the position I was in today, knowing there are other families out there facing the same impossible choices, I want to make sure no one else has to choose between their dignity and their loved one's life. The conviction in her voice sent a chill down Nathaniel's spine. She was talking about preventing others from facing the choice she'd been willing to make, the choice that brought her into his life and changed everything. That's a beautiful goal, Victoria said, and Nathaniel could hear genuine admiration in his mother's voice. And with the right backing, it can make a real difference. Deborah looked between them, confusion flickering across her face. The right backing? Nathaniel leaned forward. Deborah, what if I told you that Bruce Industries has been looking for the right nonprofit partner? Someone who understands the issues from personal experience and has a passion to make real change happen. I would say that sounds too good to be true, she said carefully. It's not. It's just what happens when the right people find each other at the right time. He paused, studying her face. But first, there's something I'd like to do if you're willing. What? I'd like to meet your mother tonight, if possible. Deborah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. You want to meet my mother? Yes. I want to meet the woman who raised someone like you. I want to see for myself the person whose life we're fighting to save." Something shifted in Deborah's expression. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. She's not what you'd expect. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she's been through a lot. The cancer, the treatments. She's not the strong woman she used to be. She's fragile now, and she gets tired easily." Deborah's voice was protective, almost offensive. "I don't want you to think less of her because of what the disease has done to her. The fact that she was trying to protect her mother's dignity, even now, even with someone who was helping them, made Nathaniel's chest tighten. Deborah, I would never think less of someone for being sick. I want to meet her because she raised you, because she taught you to love the way you do, because without her, you wouldn't be the person sitting across from me right now." Tears gathered in Deborah's eyes. She's going to want to thank you. She's going to try to find some way to repay you, and it's going to break her heart that she can't. Then we'll have to convince her that she already has, Nathaniel said softly, by raising a daughter who was willing to sacrifice everything for love. An hour later, they stood outside the entrance to Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. The building was old and worn, its facade speaking of budget constraints and deferred maintenance. It was a world away from the gleaming private facilities Nathaniel was accustomed to, but he could see the dedication in the faces of the staff moving through the corridors. "Room 314, Deborah said, leading them toward the elevators. Her steps had slowed as they approached her mother's floor, and Nathaniel could see the weight of worry settling back on her shoulders. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not about the money anymore. You've taken care of that. But seeing her like this, it never gets easier." The elevator doors opened onto a corridor that smelled of disinfectant and hope. They walked slowly toward room 314. Deborah's pace growing more hesitant with each step. "She doesn't know you're coming," she said. "I wanted to tell her about the treatment first before I explained about you." Nathaniel nodded. "However you want to handle this." Deborah stopped outside the door, her hand on the handle. "Promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll see her." "Really? See her? Not just a sick woman, but the person she is. The person she's always been." "I promise." Deborah pushed open the door, and they stepped into a small, cramped room dominated by a hospital bed and various medical equipment. The woman lying in the bed was clearly Deborah's mother. The same bone structure, the same intelligent eyes, but the cancer had taken its toll. She was thin, almost fragile-looking, her dark skin ashen with exhaustion. But when she saw Deborah, her whole face lit up. "Baby girl," she said, her voice weak but warm. "I wasn't expecting you tonight." "I have news, Mama," Deborah said, moving to her mother's bedside and taking her hand. "Good news." "Oh." The older woman's eyes moved to Nathaniel and Victoria, taking in their expensive clothes and formal bearing. "And who are your friends?" "Mama," this is Nathaniel. "Bruce and his mother, Victoria. Mr. Bruce is. He's going to help us." Understanding flickered in the woman's eyes, followed quickly by something that looked like pain. "Help us how, baby?" Deborah squeezed her mother's hand. "The treatment, Mama, the experimental therapy. We can afford it now. All of it." The woman, Nathaniel realized he didn't even know her name, looked between Deborah and him with growing alarm. "Deborah Williams, what did you do?" "Nothing, Mama. I promise. Mr. Bruce offered me a job. A good job with a signing bonus that covers everything we need. A job." The woman's eyes were sharp despite her illness, and Nathaniel could see her calculating, trying to understand how a job could solve their financial crisis so quickly. "What kind of job?" "Personal assistant," Deborah said quickly. "At his company." The woman looked directly at Nathaniel, and he felt the full weight of a mother's protective instincts. "Mr. Bruce, might I have a word with you privately?" "Mama," Deborah started. "It's all right," Nathaniel said. "Of course, Mrs. Williams." "Grace Williams." She gestured weakly toward the small chairs by the window. "Please." Nathaniel approached the bed while Deborah and Victoria moved to the far side of the room, speaking in low voices. Grace Williams studied his face with eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Bruce," she said quietly, "I may be sick, but I'm not stupid. Men like you don't just hand out jobs with signing bonuses big enough to pay for experimental cancer treatments. What did you ask my daughter to do? The directness of the question caught him off guard. Here was a woman facing death, weak and exhausted, and her first concern was protecting her daughter. Mrs. Williams, I understand your concern. Do you? Do you understand what it's like to watch your child sacrifice everything for you? Do you understand what it's like to lie in this bed knowing that your daughter is out there, desperate enough to do things she shouldn't have to do just to keep you alive? The pain in her voice was raw, overwhelming. This wasn't just about illness. This was about a mother's guilt at being the cause of her daughter's suffering. I do understand, Nathaniel said softly, more than you might think. Then tell me the truth. What did you want from her originally? Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, looking into the eyes of a woman who had raised someone extraordinary and was now watching that daughter sacrifice everything for love. I wanted her to be a surrogate, he said, simply to carry my child. Grace closed her eyes, her face crumpled with something that looked like relief and heartbreak combined. And now I want to give her a chance to save you and build the life she deserves without sacrificing anything she shouldn't have to sacrifice. Why? The word was barely a whisper. Nathaniel looked across the room at Deborah, who was watching him with barely contained anxiety. Because she showed me what real love looks like. Because she was willing to give up something precious to save your life. And that kind of love, that kind of selflessness, it deserves to be protected, not exploited. Grace was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. You care about her. It wasn't a question, and he didn't treat it like one. Yes, I do. She's special, my Deborah. She always has been. Even as a little girl, she was the one taking care of everyone else, bringing home stray cats, sharing her lunch with kids who forgot theirs, standing up to bullies twice her size. Grace's voice was growing stronger, warmed by the love she felt for her daughter. But she's never learned to let anyone take care of her. Maybe it's time she learned. Grace smiled then, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Maybe it is. And maybe you're the right person to teach her. Have you ever met someone who changed your entire perspective on what love really means? Share your story in the comments below. Before Nathaniel could respond, Deborah peered at his side. Is everything okay? Grace reached for her daughter's hand, pulling her closer. Everything's perfect, baby girl. Mr. Bruce and I were just getting acquainted, and Deborah looked between them anxiously. And I think you made a very good choice, Grace said firmly, in more ways than one. Deborah's confusion was obvious, but before she could ask for clarification, Grace continued. Now tell me about this treatment. When can we start? For the next hour, they talked about medical procedures and treatment timelines, about hope and possibilities. Nathaniel found himself watching the interaction between mother and daughter, seeing the deep bond that connected them, the way they communicated with glances and gestures as much as words. This was what family looked like. This was what love looked like when it was real and tested and proven strong enough to survive anything. When visiting hours ended, they stood to leave. Grace caught Nathaniel's hand as he moved to say goodbye. Mr. Bruce, she said quietly, thank you not just for the money, though that means everything, but for seeing her, for really seeing who she is. Thank you for raising her to be who she is, he replied. As they walked back to the elevator, Deborah was unusually quiet. Finally, as the doors closed, she turned to him. What did she say to you when you were talking privately? Nathaniel considered his answer carefully. She asked me what I wanted from you. She wanted to make sure I wasn't taking advantage of your desperation. And what did you tell her? The truth, that I wanted something from you originally, but that meeting you changed my mind. That now I just want to protect what you have instead of taking it away. Deborah was quiet for a moment. She likes you. How can you tell? Because she called you by your first name when we left. She only does that with people she trusts. The elevator opened onto the main floor, and they walked out into the cool evening air. The city stretched around them, millions of lights creating a tapestry of dreams and struggles and hopes. Nathaniel, Deborah said suddenly, stopping on the sidewalk. Yes, what happens now? I mean, I know I have the job and my mother's going to be okay, but what happens between us? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities neither of them had fully acknowledged yet. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I've never been in this situation before." "What situation?" "Meeting someone who made me want to be a better man." The words slipped out before he could stop them. More honest than he'd intended to be. But looking at her face in the glow of the streetlights, seeing the way her eyes widened with surprise and something else, hope, maybe he realized he didn't want to take them back. "Nathaniel," she said softly, "I know it's complicated. I know we have a professional relationship now, and I don't want to make things uncomfortable for you. But I also can't pretend that what I feel for you is purely professional. What do you feel for me?" He stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "I feel like I've been sleepwalking through my life, and meeting you woke me up. I feel like you showed me what I was missing without even trying." I feel like he paused, searching for words that could capture the magnitude of what was happening in his chest. "I feel like I might be falling in love with you." The confession hung between them, like a bridge neither of them was sure they should cross. Deborah stared at him, her lips slightly parted, her breathing shallow. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Completely crazy," he agreed. "We just met today. I know. You're my boss. I know that, too. And she gestured helplessly at his expensive suit, his perfectly styled hair, the town car waiting to take them home. You're you and I'm me." "Yes," he said simply. "You're you and you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met." Before she could respond, before either of them could think too hard about what they were doing, he leaned down and kissed her. It was soft, tentative, a question rather than demand. And when she kissed him back, when her hands came up to rest against his chest, and she rose on her toes to meet him, Nathaniel felt something slide into place in his chest, something that had been missing his entire life, without him even knowing it. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "This changes everything," Deborah said. "Good," Nathaniel replied. "I want everything to change." 6 months later, the late autumn sun streamed to floor-to-ceiling windows in Nathaniel's corner office, casting golden light across the mahogany desk where Deborah sat reviewing foundation proposals. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, and she wore a navy blue dress that spoke of confidence and success. The transformation from the desperate young woman who had walked into this building 6 months ago was remarkable. But what struck Nathaniel most was that her essential goodness, the quality that had first captured his attention, remained unchanged. "The Patterson family's application is heartbreaking," she said, looking up from the stack of papers. "Their daughter needs a heart transplant, but their insurance won't cover the anti-rejection medications. It's exactly the kind of situation we created a foundation to address." Nathaniel smiled, watching her passion ignite as she spoke about their work. The Grace Williams Foundation, named for Deborah's mother, had officially launched 3 months ago with Bruce Industries as its primary sponsor. In that short time, they'd already helped 17 families facing impossible medical costs. And Deborah had thrown herself into work with the same fierce dedication she'd once reserved for survival. "Approve it," he said. "Whatever they need. It's $150,000 over the next 2 years." "Approve it," he repeated. "That's what the money is for." She shook her head, smiling. "You can't just say yes to every application because you like helping people. We need to be strategic, make sure we're maximizing our impact. That's why I have you," he said, moving around the desk to stand behind her chair to make sure my good intentions translate into smart decisions. The past 6 months have been a careful dance between them, professional during business hours, but staying late to talk about everything and nothing. Lunches that turned into long walks through Central Park, coffee meetings that became dinners, and dinners that became something that felt suspiciously like dates. They'd been careful, both of them aware of the complexity of their situation. Deborah had insisted on proving herself professionally before allowing their personal relationship to develop, and Nathaniel had respected that boundary, even when it nearly killed him to maintain it. But 3 weeks ago, when Grace had completed her final round of treatment and received the news that her cancer was in complete remission, something had shifted between them. The crisis that had brought them together was over, replaced by something deeper and more sustainable. "Speaking of your mother," Nathaniel said, glancing at his watch, "shouldn't you be leaving soon?" You're picking her up from physical therapy at 4. Deborah looked up at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made his heart skip. Actually, I want to talk to you about that. What about it? She's moving in with me next week into the new apartment. The company had helped Deborah find a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side, close enough to the office for an easy commute, but with space for Grace to stay during her recovery. It was a far cry from the cramped Queens apartment where Deborah had been living, and she'd initially resisted the upgrade until Nathaniel pointed out that her mother would be more comfortable in a space designed for long-term recovery. "That's wonderful," he said. "How is she feeling about the move?" "Excited, nervous, grateful." Deborah turned in her chair to face him fully. "But mostly she's been asking me when I'm going to stop being stubborn about you." Nathaniel's eyebrows rose. "Oh, she likes you, more than likes you. She thinks you're perfect for me, and she's not subtle about letting me know. Smart woman, your mother. She is. And she pointed out something to me yesterday that I hadn't really considered." "What's that?" Deborah stood, moving to the window. The city spread out below them, and Nathaniel could see her reflection in the glass. Beautiful, confident, completely transformed from the desperate young woman who had first sat in this office. "She said that I've spent so much time being afraid of taking advantage of your generosity that I've forgotten to consider what I might be giving you in return." Nathaniel felt his heart start to race. "Deborah, let me finish," she said, holding up a hand. "She reminded me that love isn't just about what you're willing to sacrifice for someone. It's also about what you're willing to accept from them. And I've been so focused on proving I can make it on my own that I haven't let myself think about what we could build together." She turned to face him, and the vulnerability in her eyes took his breath away. "I've been thinking about what you said that night outside the hospital about falling in love with me. I meant every word. I know you did. And I should have told you then that I was falling in love with you, too." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Deborah, I was scared," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "Scared that my feelings weren't real, that they were just gratitude dressed up as something else. Scared that I wasn't good enough for your world. Scared that if I let myself love you and it didn't work out, I'd lose not just you, but everything you'd given my mother and me. And now I know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the man you are, the man who saw a desperate woman and chose to protect her instead of using her, the man who meets my mother for breakfast every Saturday morning because he knows she gets lonely during the week, the man who created a foundation to make sure no other family has to face the choice we did." She stepped closer, and he could see tears gathering in her eyes. "The man who made me believe that I deserved to be loved not for what I could give, but for who I am. You do deserve that," he said softly. "You deserve everything." "So do you," she said, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "You deserve to be loved not for what you can provide, but for the good man you've always been underneath all that armor." Before he could respond, she kissed him, not the tentative, questioning kiss they'd shared outside the hospital, but something deeper, more certain, a claim and a promise, and a beginning all rolled into one. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I love you," she said simply. "Not your money, not your generosity, not what you've done for my family. I love you, the man who reads poetry when he thinks no one is looking, the man who knows the names of every security guard in this building, the man who cried when my mother called him son for the first time. I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love your strength, your compassion, your refusal to compromise your principles no matter what. I love that you make me want to be worthy of you every single day." "You already are worthy," she said. "You always were. You just needed someone to show you." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and felt something settle in his chest. The restless searching that had driven him for years was finally quiet, replaced by a sense of coming home he'd never experienced before. "Marry me," he said against her lips. She pulled back, her eyes wide. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, more certain than he'd ever been of anything in his life. "I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But I don't want to waste another minute pretending this is anything other than what it is. I want to build a life with you. Deborah, I want to grow old with you. I want to raise children who have your heart and your strength. I want to wake up every morning knowing that the most extraordinary woman in the world chose to love me back. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she was smiling. Are you sure? Really sure? Because once you marry me, you're stuck with my mother calling you at 6 a.m. to discuss her garden, and my tendency to bring home every stray case that crosses our foundation's desk, and my complete inability to understand why anyone needs more than 3 pairs of shoes. I'm counting on all of that, he said, laughing, especially the shoe thing. Do you have any idea how much closet space that's going to save us? Us? She repeated as if testing the word. I like the sound of that. Is that a yes? That's a yes, she said, launching herself into his arms. That's a definite, absolute no take-backs yes. He spun her around, both of them laughing like children, and when he set her down, she was glowing with happiness. Although, she said, suddenly looking serious, I have one condition. Anything. The wedding has to be small. Really small. Just family and close friends. I don't want some society spectacle that's more about showing off than celebrating love. Done. What else? And we're not doing a prenup. That surprised him. Deborah, that's not necessary. I trust you completely. I know you do, but I don't want there to be any question ever about why I married you. I want everyone to know that I chose you not for what you could give me, but for who you are. And I want you to know that when I say for richer or poorer, I mean it. The absolute conviction in her voice took his breath away. Here was a woman who had nothing when they met, and now that she had the security of a good job and a bright future, she was willing to tie her fate to his without any legal protection. You're extraordinary, he said softly. No, she said smiling. I'm just a woman who learned what real love looks like, and I learned it from you. 1 year later, the small garden behind Grace Williams' new house in Westchester was decorated with white roses and fairy lights. About 30 people sat in folding chairs, watching as Deborah walked down the makeshift aisle toward Nathaniel, who was waiting under an arch of flowers that Grace had insisted on growing herself. She was radiant in a simple white dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, carrying a bouquet of the roses from her mother's garden. But it wasn't her beauty that made Nathaniel's breath catch. It was the absolute joy on her face, the way she looked at him as if he was her entire world. When she reached him, he took her hands, marveling at how perfectly they fit together. Dearly beloved, the minister began, but Nathaniel barely heard the words. He was too busy memorizing this moment. The way the late afternoon sun caught the gold in Deborah's eyes, the way she bit her lip to keep from crying, the way Grace beamed at them from the front row. The couple has written their own vows, the minister announced. Nathaniel cleared his throat, suddenly nervous despite having practiced these words 100 times. Deborah, he began 1.5 years ago, I thought I knew what I wanted from life. I thought success was measured in dollars and achievements and things I could accumulate. Then you walked into my office, willing to sacrifice everything for love, and you showed me what real wealth looks like. He squeezed her hands, drawing strength from her steady gaze. Real wealth is having someone who believes in you when you don't believe in yourself. Real wealth is building something together that's bigger than either of you could create alone. Real wealth is knowing that no matter what happens, you'll face it together. His voice grew stronger as he continued. You didn't just save your mother's life, Deborah. You saved mine too. You showed me that the best version of myself was still possible, and you loved me into becoming him. So, I promise you today that I will spend every day of our marriage trying to be worthy of the love you've given me. I promise to protect your dreams the way you protected mine. And I promise to love you not just for who you are, but for who you inspire me to be. Deborah was crying openly now, but her smile was radiant. When it was her turn, her voice was clear and strong. Nathaniel, she said, when I was growing up, my mother used to tell me that there are 2 kinds of people in the world, those who see problems and those who see possibilities. You taught me that the best people are those who see problems and turn them into possibilities for everyone. She paused, gathering her thoughts. You could have taken advantage of my desperation. Instead, you chose to be the answer to my prayers. You could have seen my inexperience as a liability. Instead, You saw it as potential. You could have treated our foundation as a charitable tax write-off. Instead, you've made it your passion. Her voice grew softer, more intimate. But most importantly, you could have seen me as someone to be rescued. Instead, you saw me as someone worth believing in. You gave me the chance to save myself. And then you loved me for the woman I chose to become. She lifted his hands to her lips, pressing a soft kiss to his knuckles. So, I promise you today that I will never stop fighting to deserve the faith you place in me. I promise to challenge you to be your best self, the way you challenge me. And I promise to love you not just for what you've given me, but for the man you've chosen to be. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was gentle, reverent, full of promise for all the years ahead. As they turned to face their small gathering of family and friends, Nathaniel caught sight of Grace in the front row. She was crying, but her face was glowing with health and happiness. The experimental treatment had worked better than anyone had dared hope, and the woman who had been given months to live was now planning to dance at her daughter's wedding. Later, as the sun set and the fairy lights twinkled in the gathering dusk, Nathaniel found himself on the small dance floor Grace had insisted they set up, swaying slowly with his wife to music that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than the small speaker system. "No regrets?" Deborah asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "Only one," he said. She pulled back to look at him, concern flickering in her eyes. "What?" "I regret that it took me 39 years to find you." She laughed, the sound bright and joyful in the evening air. "Well, I needed those 25 years to become someone worthy of finding." "You were always worthy," he said, spinning her slowly. "You just needed the chance to shine." As they danced, surrounded by the people who loved them most, Nathaniel thought about the journey that had brought them here. Two people from different worlds, thrown together by circumstance, who had chosen to see possibilities instead of problems. The foundation was thriving, having helped over 100 families in its first year. Deborah had enrolled in business school, determined to learn everything she could about running a nonprofit effectively. Grace was cancer-free and had become something of a surrogate grandmother to half the neighborhood children. And Nathaniel had learned that the greatest wealth wasn't what you could accumulate, but what you could give away. That the best investments weren't in stocks or real estate, but in people and their dreams. "What are you thinking about?" Deborah asked, noticing his contemplative mood. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am that you climbed out of that taxi a year and a half ago." "Actually," she said, grinning, "I'm grateful you were decent enough to change your mind about what you wanted from me." "Best decision I ever made," he said, dipping her dramatically. "Well, second best." "What was the best?" "Asking you to marry me." As the evening wounded down and their guests began to head home, Nathaniel and Deborah found themselves alone in the garden with Grace, who was collecting the centerpieces she'd made from her roses. "Thank you, Mama," Deborah said, hugging her mother tightly, "for everything. For raising me to recognize love when I found it. For teaching me that I deserve to be happy. For showing me what strength really looks like." "Baby girl," Grace said, smoothing Deborah's hair the way she had when she was small. "You gave me the greatest gift a mother can receive. You let me live to see you happy. You let me dance at your wedding. You let me meet the man who loves you the way you deserve to be loved." She turned to Nathaniel, and he saw tears in her eyes. "And you, son, because that's what you are now. You know that, right? You gave me my daughter's happiness. There's no greater gift you could have given me." As they said their goodbyes and prepared to leave for their honeymoon, a simple week in a cabin upstate, because Deborah had insisted she wanted to spend her first days as husband and wife somewhere quiet where they could just be together. Nathaniel felt a sense of completion he'd never experienced before. He'd started this journey wanting an heir, someone to carry on his name and inherit his wealth. Instead, he'd found something infinitely more valuable, a partner who made him want to be worthy of the love she offered, a purpose that extended beyond his own desires, and a family built not on blood or obligation, but on choice and commitment. What would change in your life if you started seeing people as possibilities instead of problems? Share your thoughts in the comments about how love has transformed your own perspective. Standing in Grace's garden, his wife's hand in his, surrounded by the scent of roses and the promise of tomorrow, Nathaniel Bruce finally understood what it meant to be truly wealthy. It had nothing to do with money. It had everything to do with love. Sometimes the most life-changing moments come disguised as the worst days of our lives. Nathaniel thought he was looking for a business transaction, but found the love of his life instead. Deborah thought she was sacrificing her future, but discovered she was building it. What started as desperation became transformation, proving that when we choose love over fear, compassion over exploitation, everyone wins. Thank you for watching the story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.